It's Ash from Super Videos back for another Q&A video. This is going to be Q&A number 39. So as always, if you're not caught up with the Walking Dead's TV show and comic book, don't watch the video because it will spoil things for you. So that being said, let's get right into this. The first question comes from David Farley. They ask, do you think we will see Daniel Salazar or Tobias again, or will it be like a Morales thing where they just never return? By the way, this is a Fear the Walking Dead question. So I think for Tobias, it's definitely a Morales thing. I don't think we will ever see him again. But for Daniel Salazar, I think the way they set it up and the way they had his quote-unquote death scene, it seems like we may see his return sometime in the future. So it's not out of ordinary, or it's not a stretch to think that he's gonna come back. But for Tobias, it's definitely a Morales thing. He's not gonna come back. But that's a good question. The next question comes from Final Mystery T. You have 3 questions. The first one, if Sasha had not died, who do you think Rick would have picked to take Lucille? Or who would you pick if put in the same place? So that's actually a pretty cool question. I think if Sasha didn't die and didn't turn into a walker, then of course, as Negan said, Rick had to choose someone to get Lucille. I don't think Rick would have chosen someone. I think Rick would have fought back. He would not have stepped back and choose someone to die by the hands of Negan, by Lucille. Even if it meant that Sasha was gonna die, I don't think that Rick would have chosen someone. If anything, he may have sacrificed himself before he even chose anyone else. Now, in terms of who would I have picked, that's a tough decision, because if I was in his place, if I was the leader, I would not want any of my people to die, so I would not be able to pick anyone. Now, I don't know what I would have done under pressure, but I definitely would not have picked someone straight away. The next question you have is, should Jada ask for forgiveness from Rick or join Negan and become a full-time savior? So, Jada can do whatever she wants, but to me, and I'm assuming to Rick, what Jada did is unforgivable. So, she can ask for forgiveness, but I don't think, or should I say, I don't want Rick to forgive her. So it's better if she just becomes a full-time savior. I'm pretty sure Negan has some stern words for her, or maybe more, afterwards, because of course she did ditch Negan and the Saviors, even with the deal that they had. So there may be a little bit of an altercation between Jada and Negan in Season 8, which I'm very excited for. The last question you have is, what impression has Season 7 left on you? That's a pretty good question. I actually think that there's a couple things that we learned from Season 7. Even though it was a slow season, but there's a couple things that we clearly know after Season 7. One is that there is a new kid in town. His name is Negan, and he's more menacing and he's more brutal and a more tough villain to beat than any of the villains that Rick and company have faced in the past. That's one. The next thing is that the world is much, much bigger than Rick and the others thought. It's not just Alexandria, it's not just the Hilltop. There's way more communities out there, there's way more people out there, and there's way more interesting structures of communities out there. The next thing is that even though Rick and the others will break and will have to rise up, they will always rise up. And together as a family, they will always be able to beat anything that comes their way. The last thing that we know from Season 7 is that even though the Saviors and Negan are very tough, very brutal and everything, they have a few vulnerabilities that Rick and the others can use to their advantage. So that's basically a summary of what I got from Season 7 and the impression it left on me. But that's a great question. The next question comes from Derek Kuchin. I'm sorry if I butchered that name, but you ask, do you think Negan could die in Season 8? So there's a couple things here. One, Negan is way too big of a villain to have 2 seasons worth of material for him and just to die afterwards. 2, if they follow the comics, Negan is not dying anytime soon. There's a difference between Negan dying and Negan no longer being in charge anymore. So in terms of Negan dying in Season 8, I don't think so, but in terms of him being in charge after Season 8, that's definitely a no. I think Season 8 is the end of the era for Negan and the Saviors, for sure. At least for now. Of course, for comic readers, you know the story we're facing now, but I think for a long time, Negan and the Saviors will no longer be in charge anymore after season 8. The next question comes from Chandler Patterson. He asks, when do you think Maggies Baby will come? So, I have no idea how long the baby is supposed to be at this point, but I would probably say not for a while, because of course, she just noticed that they're gonna have a baby. Because if you remember, the first time they really knew that there's gonna be a baby was when they first went to the hilltop, and that wasn't too long ago. I think that it's definitely too early for Maggie's baby to be born, so not for a while. The next question comes from Frosty Gator, and they ask, who do you think will die in All Out War Season 8 of The Walking Dead's TV series? So, a bunch of background characters, a bunch of minor characters, a bunch of saviors. But in terms of main characters, I have like 5 main characters from both sides of the war that I think may die in Season 8. So I can't really put my fingers on 2 or 3 for sure. So I have a list of 5 people. Now I don't think all of these 5 people are gonna die, but I think most of them will. So one is Morgan, Carol, Daryl, Simon from the Saviors, and Jada. So these are the top 5 main characters that I think are gonna die in Season 8, in All Out War. But there's definitely gonna be more background characters that are gonna die in the war, for sure. The next question comes from Jiggy Almandras the Goose. You have 2 questions. The first one, should we expect more of Jada and the Scavengers this next season? For sure. I think they set up the Scavengers at the end of Season 7, and they would not have built them up as much as they did if they weren't gonna be a somewhat important aspect of the story in the next season. So I definitely think that we will see more of them in Season 8. The next question you have is, if Andrea really died in the last issue, do you think it is cool if Rick will hook up with Magna? Hell no. I think if Andrea dies, Rick would not go with anyone else, at least not for a long time. And I think Andrea's death may have a big impact on Rick, and we may see the dark side of Rick once again. So, in terms of your question, I don't think that it's a good idea for him to go with Magna, or anyone else for that matter, at least not for a while. So yeah. The next question comes from Carmen de Jesus. They ask, will Simon die in Season 8, Episode 1 or 2? I don't think he's gonna die that early in the war. So Season 8, Episode 1 and 2 would still pretty much be the initial point of the war, or the first few episodes of the war. So I don't think that he's gonna die that early. I think there's a chance that Simon is gonna die, but not that early. I think probably by the end of the war, maybe near the end of the war, he's gonna die, for sure. The next question comes from Matthew Moraga. You have 2 questions. The first one, what season do you think is the best so far? That's a good question. For me, Season 6 is the best season The Walking Dead has ever done. Season 7 is nowhere close. Season 5 was closer, but I still think Season 6 just takes the prize as the best season so far for me. The next question you have is, what do you think is the best episode of The Walking Dead so far? Great question. The best episode would have to be No Way Out for me. There's been a bunch of episodes that are at the top of my list for best episodes, but I think at this point, nothing beats No Way Out. At the top, a couple front runners are No Sanctuary, The Day Will Come When You Won't Be, The First Day of the Rest of Your Life, Conquered, Too Far Gone, episodes like that. But I think the top for me is definitely No Way Out. The next question comes from The Gaming Wolf. You have 2 questions. The first one is from the comics. Do you think Negan will regain control of the Saviors in issue 168 or not? I think there is a possibility that he will, but I don't think they're just gonna repeat the storyline that they had before. He's not just gonna regain control and attack the survivors again. I think it's gonna be very different than the first time. But in terms of your question, I think he will regain control in some form. Either regaining control by just killing them all, or regaining control by making them follow him again. But like I said, I think it's gonna be different than what they did with him previously. The next question you have is from the TV show. I know I asked a question similar as this, but if Sherry's disappearance remains, do you think Simon could take Sherry's comic role? of leading the Saviors and try to take over Alexandria? So that's a great question. I think there's two things. One is that I do agree with you that Sherry's disappearance is probably going to remain. I don't think we will ever see Sherry again. And two, if she even returns, I don't think they can follow her storyline as they did in the comics, because Sherry in the show is way different than Sherry in the comics. So they can't have the same story. So even if she returns, they're gonna need to remix the story and give that comic arc to someone else. Now in terms of whether it's Simon or someone else, I think it's possible for it to be Simon, but I think Simon is gonna die in All Out War. So in my mind, I think it's possible for it to be Simon, but it could very well be any of the other Saviors, like Ura or someone else. But that's a great question. The next question comes from 0718 Dragon Lord. You ask, for the show and comic, how would Shane have handled the Whispers? And also, how would you kill off Rick when he dies? So for your first question, I think if Shane was alive, he would more or less go to war with the Whispers just like Rick did. So there's gonna be really no difference there in my opinion. In terms of how would Rick die, I think they're gonna need to give him an iconic death. I don't care how he dies, as long as it is iconic and it's something that is unpredictable and we don't see coming. But I also want it to be realistic as well. So yeah, but in terms of how specifically, I don't really care how they kill him, as long as it's iconic, realistic, moves the story forward. Even if it's the end of the story, it would still be moving the story towards that end. And also, it's something that is unpredictable. The next question comes from the one and only bad guy. You ask, what's your opinion on Scott and will he become a badass? So for Scott, I think he's a background character, so I don't really have a lot of opinions about him. We haven't seen him that much. In terms of him becoming a badass, sure, why not? Anyone could become a badass. At Alexandria, at the Hilltop, at the Kingdom, anywhere else. So yeah. The next question comes from Royals King 35 Royal. They ask, how would you like if Rick Lucille Negan? Because Negan should get an iconic death. I definitely agree that Negan should get an iconic death, but there's two things with him dying with Lucille. One, it's predictable. Everyone predicts if Negan dies, he's gonna die by the hands of Rick with Lucille. So that's very predictable. And also, the second thing, Lucille is already destroyed, so Lucille doesn't exist anymore. So for that wouldn't really work out. The next question comes from Royal King 35 Royal again. You ask, for the show and comic, do you think Rick's group will end up at DC, and could you see Donald Trump or Obama or a fake president come into the show? I think that would be really cool. By the way, thanks for answering and nice video. So no problem, thank you for your compliment. In terms of Rick and the others finding the president, I think if they actually do find the president, it would need to be a fake president. It can't be a real president. This is not a real world. So it's not going to be Donald Trump or Obama. Although it would have been cool if Rick comes across Donald Trump and shoots him in the head, but that's besides the point. I don't think it's going to be a real president. If they find the president, it's going to be a fake president, or the president in that world. Now, that being said, I don't think they will. I don't think that they're going with that for the story. There's a lot of things that they would need to address if they want a story like that to play out. The last question comes from Evan Russell. They ask, do you think Morales could show up in Fear the Walking Dead? So, I've already answered this 1,000 times, I think. No, I don't think Morales is going to come back. I think we should just let him go. He's dead. Don't think about Morales anymore. He's not coming back. That's it for this Q&A video. Thank you for participating. If you want to participate in my next Q&A video, write your questions in the comment section below. Write Q&A before your comment so I can find it. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.